what I soon figured out is the things that make you successful at school don't necessarily make you successful in the workplace. But I've seen this. This is what I did, and I've seen this a lot with many people that I work with. That when they're not getting the success that they would like to have, they'll double down.
Yeah.
They'll take on more. They'll try to go faster. They'll just put more pressure on themselves, and that doesn't, I mean, that sometimes can help them be successful, but part of what I teach in coaching is like how to shift the mindset and and also sort of zoom back so you see more of what's going on in your environment and you
Yeah.
understand the impact that you're having in that context, because often people they don't. The reason why I called my book Winning the Game of Work is because it really is sort of like a game, and many people don't approach it with any kind of strategy.
Yeah.
And once you start realizing that sometimes the behaviors that you exhibit don't have the intended consequences, it's important to step back and do things differently.
Hmm.
Um, but even when people can, they do sacrifice, they delay gratification, and they finally get to the VP title or the director, or they're making, six figures. A lot of
Yeah.
times they'll get to that and they'll think that once they get to that, they'll be happy.
Yeah.
And they'll wake up and say, well, I've gotten everything I said I wanted, and I've paid a high price for it in terms of working so hard and being stressed out, and sometimes having even health and relationship problems because
Yeah.
they've ignored parts of their lives, that they're upset because they realize they're not happy. It didn't make them happy.
Hmm.
And I like business. I like working hard. I like money. I like, the trappings and the ability to do cool things in the workplace. And so I never say like, oh, to be happy you have to sell everything and move to an ashram in India and meditate all day. Like
Yeah.
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is room in your life, if you're willing to do things differently, to expand the overlap between your success and your happiness, to have more balance, like you
Yeah.
said. One of the pieces of research that I came across when I was writing my book is this. I don't know if it's an area of study for a professor at Harvard Business School named Tom DeLong, and he studies high achievers. And his hypothesis is that high achievers are addicted to external validation. And
Right.
I was like, wow, that
Hmm.
that really blew my mind when I read that, because first of all, I could recognize myself in it, that I was always
Yeah.
like looking in school. I was looking like, what does the teacher want? What do I need to do to get extra credit? I want to get into a good college, all of those things. I was really focused on what was going on outside of me. What does my mother think? What does the teacher think? What does your boss think?
Yeah.
And what can happen is that we lose connection with our own internal judgment and
Hmm.
our own internal wisdom. And, I see it very often where people have like a big conflict between, part of them knows or believes that something's right. And then they're very frustrated because they're not getting validation for that at work. They're
Yeah.
working so hard and nobody's noticing, or, there's some kind of conflict and they just feel really beat up. And I really think that part of the issue there is, I mean, a couple things, like shifting the mindset to value yourself more.
Hmm.
Because so often people are working hard for, in the hopes that somebody's going to come and, pat them on the back and say, good job, you
Yeah.
know. And I mean, of course, everybody wants that. That would be nice to have it, but we shouldn't be miserable because we're not getting that. We can
Definitely.
we can do it for ourselves, in
Yeah.
fact. And that's one of the things that I work with clients on a lot of times is making sure that they have positive self-talk.
Hmm.
Because often, if they're working really hard and they've got some big project or presentation or something, and um, they'll worry so much about it, and there's just like a lot of negative thoughts going through their head, which the irony of that is that worry and rumination drains energy away from productive activity. And
Yeah.
so people think that they're protecting themselves by worrying, but actually they're pulling energy away from them actually being able to do a good job on it. So sometimes,
Hmm.
if they're worried about doing a bad job, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because of how they're approaching it.
Yeah.
Um, I also will see where if someone doesn't make a mistake, that they will talk to themselves internally really negatively about it. Like they'll say, "Oh, that was just a bonehead move. That's so stupid. You always do this." And it's really, really important for us to be positive and support ourselves and stand by ourselves, because in fact it's not what other people think of us that really bothers us. It's what
Yeah.
we think about what other people think of us, because in fact we don't even know what other people think.
Hmm.
Sometimes people might tell us, but a lot of times they don't. Maybe
Yeah.
they don't give us a lot of praise, and we're just internalizing that they don't like us or they don't think we're doing a good job, when in fact they might think you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
um, and and even if, I mean, there's lots of toxic bosses out there, and a lot of people who are not good leaders, and we really need to be careful about how much power we give these people. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people that will try to intimidate and manipulate and coerce to get people to do the things they want them to do. They'll lead through fear. And
Mm.
it's important for us not to buy into that, to
Yeah.
see it for what it is. I mean, it's like if you're playing, football or soccer, right? And there's somebody who is constantly, you know, doing, fouling people, right?
Yeah.
And they don't get caught by the referee, right? Like it's frustrating when that happens, but we've got to
Yeah.
recognize, like we might say to ourselves, I'm a terrible soccer player because, I can never get it into the goal. We've got to see, well, if this guy keeps fouling me and he doesn't get
Mm.
called on it, that's not my fault, right? Like I'm still a good soccer player, even though, this person is doing something bad. We've got to
Yeah.
maintain that positivity around ourselves and be there to support ourselves. So, I mean, these are some of the things that I think are helpful to regain that balance. But I also think that it's important to, sometimes step back and say, what are my values? What are my personal
Yeah.
values? What do I really want?